Today on the Big Six in 60, the Golden Knights win Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final.
VGK rallies from 2 goals down to pull out a 5-4 Game 1 victory.
The Spurs and Knicks tip off in the NBA Finals tonight.
The narrative was about how inexperienced they were and how they haven't been here before.
And the Falcons give Drake London a payday.
On a 4-year contract extension worth $141 million.
This is the Big Six in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big Six in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big Six in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Golden Knights stole Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final in Raleigh, winning late on a Tomas Hertl goal. Tony Cordasco and Chris Golick with Locked On Golden Knights have the recap.
VGK rallies from 2 goals down to pull out a 5-4 Game 1 victory. Tomas Hertl, the hero, he scores the game winner, his second in the past 3 games after he had a 29-game goalless streak. Hertl's goal came after a Carter Hart save, a big one on Seth Jarvis on a shot in close. The winning goal came after Hertl himself won the faceoff. Then Colton Sissons and Hertl, they scissored, little scissor or slizzard or whatever they did on the cycle. And then Sissons said that he traded 2 places as he read the Hertl movement in the slot. And then Hertl beats Freddie Anderson with about 4 minutes remaining. And he finds this victory there in a back and forth game. Hertl said that the play started in the D zone. Joe Pavelski is the player that he credited for helping him out. They had about a 30-minute conversation when Hertl was going through those doldrums and couldn't score in those 29 games. He finally broke through. He said that he told him what to do, and he said he had a lot of chances during this drought, did Tomas Hertl. But why was Hertl so antsy there and not wanting to answer the question again about the 29-game goalless streak when you have a fresh crop of reporters, right? And then you also have the national. It's because of Torts. It's because Torts has rubbed off on him, I guess. But
I don't
Tomas Hertl.
Give an inappropriate word about his goalless streak. I don't care about yesterday. I care about the fact that the Golden Knights are 1-0 in the Stanley Cup Final. I can give 2 you-know-whats about what the national media thinks about Hertl not answering why he didn't score in the last 29 games after he scored the game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup Final. So that's the takeaway right there for me. And you mentioned cycle in there. Going back and watching all the dots moving around on the NHL goal visualizer on NHL.com this morning. Cycle. That was absolutely, I think, the root of 3 of the 5 goals, 4 of the 5 goals. Something you didn't see a lot of the Golden Knights. You didn't see them do a lot of cycles recently. It was a lot more transition, quick strikes, things like that. And something else in their weaponry and Tortorella to find a way league. Yeah, they found a way. The Golden Knights did. It was not either team's best effort by any means, but once the Golden Knights slowed the game down, they looked even / maybe a little bit better, but definitely it was an even game after some initial concern.
Not the cleanest game VGK has played, as they had 18 giveaways, including 2 early in the game that led to the couple of goals for Carolina, and Nikolai Ehlers scoring twice off of, again,
you were so high on Ehlers, Tony. You need credit for that. You were so high on Ehlers, and look at that start he had.
Yeah, he had a tremendous start, and we knew that they were going to be coming, the Hurricanes, but we also knew that VGK could score goals. But again, an out of position Shea Theodore 25 seconds into the game, off to the races, and Ehlers makes it 1-0. And then Ehlers again off of a bad cross ice pass from Jack Eichel, and it was 2-0 early. The good thing is that this was early in the game. There was some nervousness by VGK, according to Johnny Tortorella. And that's when Torts told the team just to relax. He thought the Golden Knights, again, just were out of sorts early, nervous, what have you. And we have to talk about that timeout taken by Tortorella. He said, we're going to get opportunities, he told the team. We've got to keep our patience. We can't throw the puck east-west. There's a lot of hockey to go. And here come the Golden Knights as they rally from behind from 2 early goals down.
Yeah, what I like, going back to the Carolina goals, I don't feel that Carolina necessarily did a whole lot. I mean, Shea Theodore pinches. That's not a mistake that Carolina forced. Shea Theodore made a decision. Wrong decision, but he made a decision. Jack Eichel forcing that puck, that's just a mental error right there. That's all that is. That's not Jack Eichel being forced into making a bad play by any means. And then a Noah Hannafin giveaway later, and here we are wondering how this is all going to play out here. So these are fixable mistakes. These are correctable. And yeah, the Hurricanes did have some giveaways as well on their goals, but I thought the VGK did a much better job at earning their goals, especially the cycle on the game winner between a nice little basically what a give and go between Sissons and Hurdle right there. Just a great grinder play. This is the definition of a grinder victory for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And Shea Theodore got VGK on the board with that slap shot through traffic. It hit a defender, Eric Robinson, in front, went into the goal. And I really felt late in that first period, and I don't know if you could detect this at all as well, but the Canes, they weren't really pressing VGK as much.
You said end of the first?
Towards the end of the first period, okay. I just felt that they didn't have as much gas. I didn't feel that they were pressing as much, that the pressing, again, was not as tight, the coverage, like it was in the first 10 minutes of the game, and there were more open lanes, I felt, to shoot the puck.
I mean, the Golden Knights found their game is what happened. They were shell-shocked early, and they were able to slow down the bleeding and slow down the game. I think that's the bigger perspective right there. Carolina, the first, especially the first, 4 minutes of the game, we're like, oh my God, this is a much different situation than what the Golden Knights have dealt with lack of respect, if you will, to Colorado, Anaheim, and Utah. But the Golden Knights didn't have their best start, but they slowed it down as the game went on. They just started making better and better decisions. And 5-4 hockey game like we all predicted. Actually, Chris said 5-3 to be fair, but
that's crazy. Eichel, again, just playing steady, shakes off the bad start, starts the second period with that pass to Barbashev just 30 seconds in.
Beautiful.
Low to high. That seemed to work last night for the Golden Knights. Eichel, a couple of posts in the game as well. One on that second VGK power play, also shot wide. He could have had gone up a goal, his team, there with that nice little dangle there. Lost the handle. VGK scores on the Carlson goal from Howden. 3 consecutive goals in 5 of the last 6 games. Another outburst for VGK. And then Jordan Stahl scores on the Hannafin turnover. We knew that was coming. Why didn't Seth Jarvis also? He had an open shot, got in deep at the net, and he didn't connect. And then in the third, I was thinking the Canes definitely did not scout VGK well. How many times have we seen Brett Howden right there on the back door on the doorstep? The Golden Knights run this play again. We've seen Marner to Howden. We've seen Marner to Stone. They're set plays, right? And then they finally here in this game, it was Theodore to Howden.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's as much of scout or a pre-scout as much as it is just a good play in the time right there in the moment. That's what
tendencies,
that is. My only real, just looking at stats, I mean, high dangers, X goals were very flat as far as very even on both sides, so don't need to waste a lot of breath on that. Giveaways were close, 18-16, 18 Golden Knights, 16 Carolina. Takeaways 7 for Carolina versus 3 for the Golden Knights. So that's something that I would like to hopefully see get a little bit flatter in the next game. Carolina giving the puck up 16 times, though. That says something right there. I might have to go back and look at Carolina's numbers throughout the playoffs, but I feel like that's a higher number than what they've done. And it's 1-0. You don't want to put too much stock into it, but this is probably the most pressure the Hurricanes have felt. I don't think they were that concerned after dropping game 1 of the Eastern Conference Final, but how are they going to respond in game 2? That's a big question for me.
We could talk when we return about the play that could have turned the game around, the non-icing call, and then also VGK held the Canes' second line in check, and Rod Brindamore was asked if he was concerned about the lack of production by Sebastian Aho. He said the top line had one good shift in the third period. Everyone has to play well if you're going to win this time of year. Your guys, your best guy's going to have to get on the score sheet. Wow.
The NBA playoffs are here, and every possession matters. If you're looking to get closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. I like using FanDuel during the playoffs because everything I need is right there in one place. You can check stats, trends, and matchups before making your picks, which makes the whole experience feel a lot more informed. Whether you're looking at player props or just following your favorite stars, it adds another level of excitement to every game. It's a really easy app to navigate, and it makes playoff basketball even more engaging from start to finish. Right now, the Knicks are at plus 210 to win the NBA title. That's more than doubling your money if they pull it off. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. The Spurs open up the NBA Finals against the Knicks tonight, and they'll try to obviously lean on Victor Wembanyama's paint presence and young depth against New York. Matthew Tynan with Locked On Spurs previews the matchup.
Totally the time I thought I would see you again would be the NBA Finals and not next year when the Knicks play the Spurs, right?
Dude, I'm pretty sure we were joking about it after the NBA Cup. Like, yeah, maybe it's a preview of the finals, right? We'll see it. We'll see this matchup again in June. I think we were talking about the fact that like the Knicks were a tough matchup for San Antonio, and then just joking like, well, we won't have to worry about it this year. Here we are. And yes, you're right. The lore of the NBA Cup grows ever stronger, just as the NBA had hoped.
It's now no longer something that you can just dismiss in the middle of December. No, now like we get a rematch and we get to decide we get 7 NBA Cup finals is what I'm looking at from the NBA's perspective right now.
And here's the thing, man, like, going back to that, as you kind of zoom out and reflect on the season that was, like, the Spurs were taking that thing really seriously. And they even talked about, with all these young dudes, like, when the conversation and the narrative was about, like, how inexperienced they were and how they haven't been here before. Granted, the NBA postseason is a little bit different than the NBA Cup. However, they were treating that situation like a do or die the whole way through. Like they were actively and it was very real too. It wasn't just kind of like lip service. They were very, very much treating that thing like it was a playoff run, even with Victor Wembanyama going through the strained calf and everything like that. So that was part of the experience that the Spurs were creating for themselves along the way this season.
Well, the Spurs have played 101 games on the NBA schedule, even though technically the NBA only acknowledges 100 of them because the NBA Cup final that we've been joking about didn't count. Yes, even though it counted toward Wemby's games played, so he could make All NBA.
It did, yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, when I heard that, I was so mad. It's like, wait, so the Knicks are like fighting tooth and nail to try and maintain the 3 seed, but this game technically does count for someone that might have missed 15, 16 games.
You know what? And that actually mattered because Victor got hurt with 3 games left, I believe. Right. And he missed the penultimate game and then came back for, I think I have that right. Either he played for part of the penultimate game, one of those, but he only needed to get 15 minutes, at least 15 minutes in one game, and he was able to do that. And a big part of that was because the NBA Cup counted there, but did not count for the record. doesn't show up in any book you look up for statistics and all that. So, but hey, look, man, you're asking guys to go out there and play an extra game. It should count toward their qualification in my eyes.
Well, this time it counts, as both of these teams now will play for the ultimate prize that the sport has to offer. And I'm going to start in San Antonio if I can, because this series that just happened with the Thunder, during the regular season, there was some hints, like the NBA Cup, the semifinal, there was a hint that, all right, maybe the Spurs actually do match up well and provide some problems for the Thunder. And as the season developed, you saw the Spurs in general become a problem for everybody.
Yeah.
But specifically this series against the Thunder, when did you specifically, as someone who watches this team every day, know that they have a chance in a 7-game series? It could be a regular season point. It could literally be the second half of Game 7. But like, when was the moment you knew, hey, this is a team that could beat the Thunder?
I think that there was at least a sign that they played each other in like a 10-day stretch. They played each other 3 times in a 10-day stretch. That was during the NBA Cup semifinals. That was their first matchup of the season. The Thunder were like 24-1 at the time, something like that. And San Antonio beats them. It's like, okay, let's see them do it again. Then they do it again. And then you see them, one of the games didn't really count because the Thunder didn't play their guys, but San Antonio won 4 games against the Thunder this season. And at first I was like, I think some of this stuff is real in terms of they're a tough matchup for the Thunder, right? Because what the Thunder do well is pressure you with that perimeter defense. They make life hell on ball handlers. That is what they do. They turn you over. They thrive on the transition stuff. But what San Antonio has is this trio of dynamic guards that can handle that pressure, that can attack that pressure, and kind of neutralize to an extent what Oklahoma City does so well on that side of the ball, and it really kind of evens things out. But even back then, it wasn't ever, for me at least, it wasn't ever like, oh, but they should be favored to beat the Thunder. I didn't start really believing that was a genuine possibility. And by the way, I picked San Antonio on my podcast to win in 7 games against Oklahoma City, which I know is kind of crazy, but number one, home court advantage doesn't matter nearly as much as it used to. The data has shown that. Number two, this is where my mind was really changed after watching the entirety of the regular season. This Spurs team, for all they lack in experience, made their own along the way and were unbelievably quick for such a young team, unbelievably quick at absorbing the mistakes that they made, applying the lessons and putting them into practice, and just totally changing what they looked like from one game to the next. Like, they were so good with the competitive responses all season long. Not a single time throughout the course of the regular season or the postseason have they lost 3 games in a row this season. And that's, to me, a pretty incredible feat for such a young team. And the longer the season went, the more they continued to prove against really good teams that not only did they belong, but they kept getting better and better and better. And the mistakes they made along the way, they quickly learned from them. And once the discipline started to settle in, you saw it in Game 7 against the Thunder, man. Like, they were just flat out the better team. I know Oklahoma City had injuries, and that is not for nothing, man. That's a big deal. But they were just on point, disciplined, locked in that Game 7, and it's just kind of a culmination of what has been this season. Now it's finals time, though. This is the ultimate test.
Yeah, it was some point during the 30-4 stretch to end the regular season that I stopped looking at the Spurs as like a nice, like, oh, they'll win a playoff series. They'll be a 4-5, and that'll be a good test for Wemby's first year. And then, like, the Knicks were one of those 4 losses, a matinee at MSG.
Yep.
And then like they kept putting up the graphic of like the Spurs have lost once in the last month, and it's like the Knicks are their only lost in the last like 2 months. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's when it started to really, because matchups obviously are important, because if you're a 1 or a 2, you play the 7 or the 8, and then if your first round series is easier, then you benefit from that. And then it was like you just laid out. It's, well, they match up really well against this OKC team. And, you know, the stat that has been said repeatedly over the past day or two since the series ended, the Thunder were 71-14 against every other team in the NBA. And we're 4-8 against the Spurs this year. So, you know, that rivalry just from a national perspective, and obviously the Knicks have given me 4 games in the last 3 weeks, so I've had a lot of chance to watch the Thunder
correct,
and the Spurs.
The Knicks' finals plan starts with Jalen Brunson running the show, and of course New York trying to keep Victor Wembanyama from taking things over. Gavin Shaw with Locked On Knicks gets into the series.
To me, the other key element there with Josh, and it'll be interesting to see what he does against Wemby, is you avoid the loading screen moments with him, where like to me like that is like the sneaky part that has killed the Knicks at times over the years with that ghost coverage. And we saw it like there were 2 like particularly like one in game 1, one in game 2, just terrible possessions for Josh, where he caught the ball at like 15 feet and he just froze. And he didn't want to shoot it because he's like, it's embarrassing. If this is what I would assume goes through his mind. Maybe he's thinking something completely different. Like, it's embarrassing if I miss this wide open 15-footer, right? Like, and they're putting this pressure on me to take the shot. And he just tries to like jam a pass in that doesn't make any sense and is in no man's land and is freezing, or the one we've all seen a million times, like when he catches it from 3. You've talked about this a lot. Sometimes this actually helps him, right? The pump. One dribble in, and it's like, all right, I'm going to add some aura to the shot and take a step back with no one near me, which is great. I'm sure we appear in a Zach Love 10 Things column back in the day, RIP. But just how like quick processing is he, and like how many mechanisms does Mike Brown just bake into his head, saying if Wemby's here, you're doing this, and it's not like a thought thing, it's a decision tree when he gets the ball.
Yeah, and like if you that March 1st game, the first quarter was kind of an epic disaster in terms of what, you know, they had like 5 points through the first 6 minutes or something like that. But you get to the third quarter and Hart was just making more plays, and part of that is like the quick processing you're talking about, like whether it's shorting the pick and roll with Cat so you can catch and pass. You saw one of those possessions where Hart kind of snuck to the elbow, Cat continued his roll, and Hart just hit him right away for a layup. You saw a couple where like he caught it and didn't want to shoot it, but like immediately transitioned into a dribble handoff with Mikal Bridges, for example, for a pull-up 3 because Wemby's not out there. So and the Knicks have gotten so much better at this, and that's where I have a lot of confidence that they're going to solve some of these problems. Like they have a lot of mechanisms, the words you used, to get out of if Hart doesn't want to shoot the 3 or doesn't feel comfortable shooting the 3, like there are other ways to hurt that defense coming in behind because Wemby's not coming out. And I think they just need to explore a lot of that, and including, of course, screening for Brunson, making Wemby come out however much he's going to come out on that action, and allowing Brunson to either walk into 3s, or now he's at least going downhill on Wemby and able to spray out of that. So that's also an important facet.
Yeah, and with Jalen, like when he is driving at Wemby, like it is, especially when Mitch is in the game, but even when Cat's in the game, like if you can get the shot to the backboard and Wemby jumps for a contest, and you guys talked about this in your show, like that's almost a win. You'll see like San Antonio, like you guys said, it's not even like big win. It's not OG Anunoby at the 4. Like it is 6'5" Devin Vassell, right? Trying to box out Karl Anthony Towns, or trying to box out Mitchell Robinson. And that is like one of the ugliest mechanisms of offense I can imagine, but it's analogous to like when Wemby just chucks it off the backboard to himself. And that's a means to get some points potentially. I'm curious your thoughts on, I mean, you mentioned like if Josh Hart didn't exist, when the Knicks do go to those 5-shooter lineups, like what does that look like? Because we've largely seen, and this is how the Knicks close game 1, right? They'll have 5 shooters, but it's a 4-out, 1-in alignment. And then you can do that. But then, and maybe the nominal in guy is the guy screening for Jalen, and you're pulling Wemby out that way. But if you don't actually have 5 guys around the arc, how does that look when they attack Wemby?
So, yeah, you have a guy in the dunkers, and he's going to be playing off of that dunker, and he's still in the paint. And if that's Cat, for example, yeah, that is true. But there are like the Knicks run actions where the guy doesn't have to stay in that dunker necessarily. Or if you have a 45 cut, for example, off of the wing, then that dunker spot guy may replace to the corner. So you're still kind of 4 out, 1 in, but you're at least exchanging. And like the Spurs will have to process that quick enough to keep Wemby where he is. But I think it's almost like that when you're 5 out, even if Cat's in the dunker, let's say, if you're in transition, like it's much harder for Wemby to just kind of park himself, right? Because if he's guarding Cat on the trail, for example, they try to run delay actions with Cat. So like, if Wemby's nominally guarding Cat, are the Spurs quick enough to just transition that whoever comes in, that's who Wemby's guarding? Like that's where miscommunications happen. So I think 5 out still puts more pressure, even though you're right, generally speaking, to open up driving lanes. They're going to have a guy in the dunker spot. But through the run of play, I think it just opens up a lot of avenues, and Wemby's going to have to make some decisions that he wouldn't otherwise have to make if he was guarding a Hart or a Mitchell Robinson, for example.
You guys talked about it. There are obviously trade-offs defensively to not having Hart on the floor, and I think we'll circle back on it when we flip to the other side of the ball, but especially defensively, just because he's built so perfectly to guard Steph Castle, and I'm curious how Landry Shamet would hold up in that matchup, or Deuce McBride, and like physically, Shamet we've all seen the 8-pack, like he's ripped, but I do think it's the guard matchups are a little worse for him on a relative basis compared to a hampered Donovan Mitchell, and not that he was on James Harden very much, but hypothetically what that would have looked like. And if that trade-off is worth it, and if we see the Knicks, I mean, obviously on the nights Josh is 6 for 8 from 3, like I assume he'll be closing every single time. Like, do you think, and maybe this is an unfair question, he's just asking to predict what Josh will shoot, but do you think as this series goes along, those groups will see more and more minutes?
Yeah, it's going to depend on like how he's shooting and how it looks. You know, I think the Knicks, Mike Brown has shown he is not like Josh Hart is his guy, like he was Tibbs' guy, and he will move off it if he has to, and that's maybe what Tibbs would not have done. He will move off it if he has to, but it's only if he has to. And I think that flexibility is important, and you know, I even thought in game 1 it probably took him a little too long, and the Knicks just got out of there with a win.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it took a 1 in 640 comeback to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Any longer, they don't win that game. They finally got him out. So you know, but it's the NBA Finals, and the margin of error is going to be much smaller in this series. So I think it is incumbent upon Brown, if it is not working early, to get off of it and trade it for something else and see how it goes, especially in game 1. So that'll be interesting. But you stay with Hart because, to your point, really good on Castle and just does a gazillion other things, as we know.
Yeah.
And as long as he is shooting the ball, to me, it's like you at some point you rely on, this is a guy who's now won playoff games for you on a fairly consistent basis every year by shooting well enough to punish this coverage. And I think he got you this far. He's a key part of this team. You do ride him until it becomes necessary to move off of it.
Yeah, and I guess my take on it is I want to see in game 1 what that looks like, and I want to see a rotation where you have Shamet out there or Deuce, either one, and the other 4 Knicks starters against the Spurs starter. Just get a taste out of it, because something SJ's talked about a lot, but Wemby's probably gotten better, but seemingly has gotten better at like being able to close and then still being able to get back to the rim and cover ground really quickly and aggressively, and some of that is just playoff level intensity, and he's maybe more equipped to do that. But to your point, if it's OG and then it's OG shooting 1,000,000 threes, like I really don't think the math works out for the Spurs there. So we'll see on that. But I want to circle back to the question I kind of half posed earlier, and I'll mention something I just mentioned, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. I have some ideas. What do you think this series looks like for them offensively? And I guess OG in particular is the bigger one, because he's just had an incredible amount of success, like obviously in transition, but also in the half court, just bullying through people. And I'm interested if that element can be there for him with Wemby parked at the rim.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get the excuse me.
Yeah,
you're not going to get the backdoor cuts.
Yeah.
As long as Wemby's in that paint, like that stuff's going to be harder as it was against the Cavs. Like we just didn't see that offense in particular that shredded the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. So there's going to have to be a jump shot series to a large extent. I mean, for Mikal, that is very much how it always is.
Happy with that.
For OG, you know, it requires continued hot shooting, which we know what he's shooting so far in the playoffs. It's, you know, we'll see. You know, there's a bit of OG can go cold. We don't want it to go cold at the wrong time, but it is possible. that happens, and you have to. But I there's always a balancing act. You can't just like swear off rim shots for the entire series, obviously. And as long as Wemby's moving around, if you get him on a closeout, a second closeout has to rotate. There are ways to get to the rim, and I think OG's cutting, finishing, 2-dribble driving, that kind of stuff is going to come in handy late in the clock. Not to mention when Wemby's off the floor, of course, like that, it becomes even more important. So for all these guys, it's going to be a balance, and I think the Knicks are strong enough, long enough to intelligently challenge Wemby when necessary. You can't just like rely on jump shots for the whole series and think you're going to win this thing. Like you're going to have to get into him a little bit, and there you can bump him. Josh Hart on that March 1st game got a couple layups just in pick and roll, just like because he's strong and can bump him low and then finish high like that. It's not impossible. So you have to. There's a healthy balance of respect, but not fear.
Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. The Falcons locked in Drake London with a massive new extension, keeping their top receiver in Atlanta long term. Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons breaks down the news.
Yes, Drake London just got paid on a 4-year contract extension worth $141 million as a base value, $100 million guaranteed. The contract is worth up to $150 million based off of the early reports with incentives and whatnot. And this now makes Drake London the third highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, passing Justin Jefferson, who got $140 million, so $1 million more to get him passed. And we were kind of expecting Drake to sign in this sort of $33 to $35 million a year range. Later in today's episode, we'll talk about, is he worth the price tag that the Falcons have paid? But, we expected the Falcons to try to get this deal done before the season started. We figured it would be their priority in terms of the two big contract extensions that are potentially looming on the horizon. The second one being Bijan Robinson. And now that Drake London has secured the bag, the Falcons can now turn their full attention to Bijan. Maybe Kyle Pitts. We'll see. Again, we'll see if they surprise us on that end. But, when they do turn their attention to Bijan Robinson, our expectation is that he will be the NFL's highest paid running back, not just in the current NFL, but potentially of all time. And we'll see if and when they get that deal done. And we were optimistic, like I said, that the Falcons would get a deal done with Drake before the season, but we weren't necessarily certain of that, right? I thought we would probably get a deal done in the dead time in the middle of July before training camp would happen, rather than at this stage in early June. We sort of weren't 100% certain about that, just because Ian Cunningham, the Falcons general manager, coming from Chicago, where he was with Ryan Poles. And when Ryan Poles took over that team as the general manager and Ian Cunningham, obviously there as the assistant GM in 2022, they basically did not extend anybody. They did not give out big money to anybody. Famously, Roquan Smith was the player that wanted to get paid next. They wound up trading him to the Baltimore Ravens, who paid him. And then the Bears wound up, paying a lot of money to Tremaine Edmonds the following year. And so I'm imagining Ian Cunningham kind of learned his lesson, like, pay the guys that are worth the money. But we saw the Falcons throughout this offseason kind of be a little frugal when it came to making big time commitments, spending, little money here. We've talked all about that throughout the offseason. Made sense given their limited cap space and given the looming extensions for Drake London on the horizon. So happy to see this deal get done. Totally makes sense that the Falcons paid him this much money and made him one of the 3 highest paid wide receivers in the NFL. I think Drake at his best is one of the 5 best wide receivers in the NFL. We've seen that pretty consistently over these last 2 years, especially. Say what you will about former Falcons offensive coordinator Zach Robinson as a play caller, but he definitely, one thing that you can't knock him for is that he figured out a way to elevate Drake London among others in this offense the last 2 years, playing like that borderline top 5 wide receiver, 800 plus yard games over the last 2 years combined. That total is tied for the 7th most in the NFL in that span. But when you factor in that Drake missed significant time with injuries, only playing 29 games, when you just look at the percentage of his games played that he results in a 100 plus yard game, that would be the 6th highest in the NFL over the last 2 years. He ranks 9th in the NFL in yards per game, but that number is slightly deflated because he spent last year injured and kind of limped through those last 3 games, especially last season, and had the Falcons just kind of shut him down for the season. That yards per game metric would be the 4th highest in the NFL, only behind Puka Nacua, Jamar Chase, and Jackson Smith and Jigba over the last 2 seasons. And one of the big things that I thought I really liked for Drake, that to me was kind of the one minor obstacle in my eyes to justifying paying Drake a big contract like the Falcons just did, was whether or not he would showcase more of the explosive potential in the passing game. And that was one thing that Drake hadn't been necessarily doing his first couple of years in the NFL, being occasionally explosive, but being more of that possession type wide receiver. But we saw, especially during the middle stretch of this past season in 2025, that 6-game stretch when he was at his healthiest last season from week 4 to week 11, obviously missing that week 8 game against the Miami Dolphins. And you just look at that 6-game stretch for Drake London between that period of time. Over that period of time, he was second only to Jackson Smith and Jigba for the most 20 plus yard plays in the NFL for wide receivers. During that stretch of the season, realistically, Drake was kind of carrying the offense and the passing game, or not the offense, the passing game, I should clarify. To me, whether you agree with this or not, but to me, that's kind of the reason why he kind of wore down last season, is just because he had to kind of carry the entire passing game on his shoulders. And it led to him, taking a little bit more wear and tear. But, the big question is going to be, he might have to do that again this upcoming season, although I think the Falcons are very optimistic that they've added, new, different, better elements around him at that wide receiver position. But we will see a changing role for Drake London in this Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees-led offense in 2026.
Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. The Seahawks extended Derick Hall, keeping another key pass rusher in place for their defense. Corbin Smith and Rob Rang with Locked On Seahawks walk through the deal.
We have a big news story involving an edge and the Seattle Seahawks. And no, they did not make a trade today, but we'll be diving into Derick Hall's new contract, why the Seahawks decided to pay him instead of Boye Mafe. We're going to look back at some of those big moves made within the division and the NFL yesterday and discuss, of course, whether or not John Schneider's got another move up his sleeves to counter in the NFC West talent wars. All coming your way. Without further ado, let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. No, the Seahawks did not get Myles Garrett yesterday, and certainly re-signing one of their own players is not going to be considered as big of a move. But a big move at the edge position nonetheless, a position that had a ton of uncertainty going into next year. Derick Hall now under contract through 2029, a 3-year, $42 million contract extension worth up to $46.5 million. And Rob, normally when we do these segments, I try to look at both sides of the coin. What are the positives? What are the negatives? I have a very hard time finding a negative on this one because I thought for sure if the Seahawks were going to re-sign Derick Hall before his final year of his rookie contract, they were going to have to at least match Boye Mafe's 3-year, $60 million contract that he signed with the Bengals in March to get him at $14 million per year and what really amounts to a 4-year, $44 million extension with that last year in his rookie deal, $11 million per year over those 4 years. I don't think it's hyperbole to say if he produces the way he has the last couple of years, that is already one of the biggest bargains you're going to find for a veteran edge in the NFL. And I think there's still so much for him to achieve in terms of reaching his ceiling still at 25 years of age. I quite frankly was blown away by the numbers today.
Yeah, it does feel like one heck of a bargain for the Seahawks. And look, Derick Hall had the one splashy season in which he I believe had what eight, 9 sacks. And I argued after that season a couple of years ago that I, in watching the tape, didn't think that he looked like a double-digit sack guy, even with that production in his second year in the NFL. He doesn't have elite twitch. He doesn't have the elite agility to be a traditional sack artist. At the same time, he plays the run with such great physicality. He is a good complementary rusher. This is a good bargain deal for the Seahawks. I think that the reason why Boye Mafe got the big deal that he got from Cincinnati Bengals is, for one, Cincinnati overspent. And number two, Boye Mafe is a more dynamic athlete. But at the same time, in terms of what Mike McDonald is looking for, run defense first, pass rush second, and physicality always. I think that Derick Hall is the picture perfect Seahawk, and I think that he feels very comfortable here. He has been embraced by the organization, and I think maybe that is one of the reasons why that he agreed to a deal that is going to be overtaken by several other pass rushers throughout the NFL. And we saw Nate Herbig of the Pittsburgh Steelers already get a bigger deal, and his production isn't that much greater than Derick Hall's. But at the same time, I do think that this is going to ultimately be a win-win for Derick Hall and for the Seattle Seahawks, because I think that Hall could be here for the long term, not just these next 4 years, but even past that. And if he does wind up out producing these numbers, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is the type of deal that he and his representation, might be looking to upgrade as they move forward with another renegotiation.
Well, I think that's one of the big benefits to this. He's, again, only 25 years old. He could be negotiating for another massive deal at 28 with the way that the Seahawks do things. If the Seahawks want to keep him at that point, if he reaches his full potential, look, we saw it in the Super Bowl. We have seen flashes where he can take over games. And we talked about this a lot during the course of last season. And look, I don't know that you and I agreed on this completely from week to week, but I thought Boye Mafe disappeared for very large stretches last year, where he just has 53 men on the field. I never felt that with Derick Hall. Even when he wasn't getting the stats, you felt him on the field. And Mike McDonald used that same terminology in multiple press conferences after games. Like, look, he might not be getting sacks, but we feel him. You feel his presence. I didn't feel that with Boye Mafe near as much last year. And the stats bear it out. Yeah, they both had 2 sacks, but Derick Hall had 11 QB hits. Boye Mafe had 2. Derick Hall had over a 16% pass rush win rate. Boye Mafe was around 11.5%. There were just some very wide gaps in terms of their overall productivity. And Derick Hall was a significantly better run defender. He was a PFF top 20 ranked run defender last year. So all around player. He's a couple years younger than Boye Mafe. And I just think his mentality and the way he plays the game, it's more Mike McDonald speed. If Pete Carroll was still head coach, Boye Mafe might have been the guy. But I think that he is a picturesque version of a Mike McDonald player, particularly that edge position. And I'm curious for your thoughts on this too, Rob. I think that this is another example of John Schneider. He is finding ways to be able to keep his middle-class players, as many of them as he can. And that's kind of been something that a lot of teams have moved away from. It's we pay our superstars, as many of them as we can, and then we have a bunch of guys in rookie contracts, not very many of the middle ground players. Having a quarterback that isn't making $50 million per year allows you to do that. But also, look, Derick Hall taking this deal, it is going to be easier for Seattle to turn around and get deals done for Devin Witherspoon and Leonard Williams and some of the other pending free agents coming up, because he could have asked for 20 plus million per year and he took 14. That is not a small chunk of change that you have in terms of financial flexibility. That is what culture and winning does. You'll stay for less. Not everybody's programmed to be that way, but Derick Hall, clearly he wants to keep having chances to win Super Bowls, and he'll take $14 million in order to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I like the way that you phrase that with like kind of the middle class player. I think that that's how you build a culture It's not about the individual players. It's about how the team is able to generate pass rushes in this case, for example. I just think that that is one of the things that Derick Hall has proven that he can be very effective. I mean, if you just look at the sack numbers, I mean, those 8 sacks a couple of years ago dropped down to 2 this past season. He had 0 sacks in his rookie season. He's played in virtually every game. So 10 sacks in 3 NFL seasons is not that productive. So I'm sure there is going to be some out there who might even think that the Seattle overpaid for Derick Hall. But I'm with you, Corb. I really think that this is kind of the blue-collar, lunch pail type of a player who is part of the rotation. You can feel, again, that physicality, the violence, the effort with which he plays. Again, I don't know that Derick Hall is ever going to be a double-digit sack guy in the NFL. But I do feel very confident that he is going to be a quality part of Seattle's rotation for the long haul. And by what I mean by that is, of course, at least these next 4 years. And again, I think that he is a prime candidate to be one of those players who it's very rare nowadays, but that plays his entire career with one NFL city. I think the Seahawks feel very fortunate that one NFL city might be Seattle.
Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. Texas A&M added 2 more recruiting pieces with Frederick Ards III and Loie Valade. Matt Glatson with Locked On Aggies breaks down the big recruiting run for A&M.
2 new commitments for Texas A&M over the weekend, and Mike Elko just continues to dominate, as we said, on the trail. The first came from linebacker Aston Whiteside, the first linebacker commit of the 2027 class for Texas A&M out of Centennial in Burleson, Texas. He is a 3-star recruit, coming in ranked as the number 73 linebacker in the country, the number 124 player in the state of Texas per Rivals.com. This is a guy who kind of has it all at the linebacker position. He played some safety in high school, which tells me that he is fast and he can play the pass exceptionally well if he is asked to do that, but he is also physical and can put his hat in the hole, put his helmet on a guy, and make stops at the line of scrimmage in the run game. He can also run sideline to sideline, and like I said, very good in pass coverage as well. Big time commitment there, and one of those foundational commitments for Texas A&M. I know everybody's going to say, oh, it's a 3-star, but this is kind of how you build a recruiting class in the modern era. You go really heavy at the top with 5 stars and high 4 stars if you can, and then you kind of build out the rest with, high trait, high caliber talent, but maybe a little bit raw 3-star guys that are going to be really the foundation of your class, the guys that you can develop to stay in College Station over the next 3 to 4 years and hope to avoid them leaving via the transfer portal because of some NIL package or something like that, which is a problem in today's day and age of college football. There is no doubt about that. But Whiteside picked Texas A&M over Kentucky. He picked them over Miami. He picked them over Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, a few of the other contenders in the Whiteside race there. And like I said, this is a guy that's not only going to be a foundation, but he's also got some traits in there that don't necessarily pop off on the stat book, but if you watch him on tape, they kind of pop off as well. Like for example, one of them is I don't think he misses tackles very often. He's a sure tackler to me. That is a very underrated trait, I think, in this particular instance, because you can have all the talent in the world at the linebacker position. You can run sideline to sideline. You can hit hard. You can force fumbles or whatever the case may be. But if you're not a sure tackler at the linebacker position, then you're going to have a big problem. Whiteside is definitely a sure-handed tackler in that regard, and he's also pretty adept at just rushing the passer as well. He can blitz. He can kind of do it all, and this is one of those very underrated commitments in my opinion. Like I said, he's joining a room right now that doesn't have another linebacker commit. We may talk about another one of those in a minute who could be coming down the pipe here pretty soon. But Ray Coney, Damian Sanford, Jordan Lockhart are the upperclassmen in the room. Ray Coney will be gone after this year, but Noah McHale is also a younger guy in the group. He's going to join those guys alongside some other younger players, and he's going to be able to compete and develop for a long time to come there for Texas A&M. And then the very next day, Mike Elko comes out and he lands another commitment for Texas A&M. This one a little bit higher on the board, in my opinion. Four-star edge rusher Frederick Ards III, the 6'4.5", 220-pound edge rusher out of Orlando, Florida, picked the Aggies over a lot of different contenders, including the Florida Gators, who are right there in his home state of Florida. But you read the scouting report for this guy, and you got to love it. This scouting report comes from Greg Biggins over at Rivals.com. He says of Ards III, one of the best edge rushers in the country, and shows some natural pass rushing skill, explodes up the field and can win with speed around the edge, but has a nice move cutting back inside as well. He can change his tempo to set up opposing offensive tackles, and his ability to close on a ball carrier really jumps out. He's a lean 215 pound. He's up to 220 now, or 220 now, and will need to add some good weight, especially in his upper body, but he is a strong kid still and has some pop at the point of contact. He can also bull rush or long arm tackle into the backfield and is tough in run support. He also played some at linebacker during the Under Armour camp. And he struggled a bit in coverage and playing in space, but he looks a little bit more comfortable playing with his hand in the ground and coming out of a 2-point stance. He finished his junior season with 73 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, and 11 sacks. And he's expected to take a big, big jump coming into the 2026 season. And he joins a class that already has some serious defensive talent in it, including at the edge rusher position, where A&M already had 5-star edge rusher Zyron Forstall out of IMG Academy in Florida. They already had Kamari Dorsey, the 5-star safety, Raylon Henry, the 5-star corner, Jaquan Snell, 4-star safety, Miles Smith, 4-star defensive lineman. Ards comes in there kind of right in between Jaden Upshaw, the wide receiver, and Jace Johnson, the quarterback. But they also have Elijah Patman at defensive line, Caden McCarty at edge rusher as well, and then Hakeem Frampton at corner with the aforementioned Aston Whiteside there as well. So a lot of good defensive talent already in this class for Texas A&M so far. And this is one that I'm particularly excited about. You heard about his ability as an edge rusher, the speed, the physicality, the bull rushing, even having the ability to have that inside move. It sounds like he's got a pretty nice repertoire heading into his senior season that's only going to continue to develop as he goes into his senior season and as he goes forward into Texas A&M. I mean, they have seriously turned some heads with their ability to develop edge rushers, and Frederick Ards III is really going to be no exception to that, in my opinion. A major, major pickup for Mike Elko and company. 2 commits for Texas A&M extends their seemingly insurmountable lead on the number 1 overall class in the country, and that's great stuff. But they are far from done right now. Texas A&M already has multiple 5-star commitments in the bag right now, 5 to be exact, including offensive tackle Mark Matthews, safety Kamari Dorsey, offensive lineman Kennedy Brown, edge rusher Zyron Forstall, and cornerback Raylon Henry, a couple of those guys that I mentioned in the last segment. But they had a loaded recruiting visit weekend this past weekend with a ton of 5-stars in attendance. And there were a couple of guys who seemingly either swung back into favor, or A&M swung back into favor with those players, and they now lead, or it just cemented Texas A&M's lead on some of those guys. And we're going to start out with one that has been one of the more interesting battles, I think, in this recruiting process, and that is 5-star corner John Meredith. This is a guy who, visited Texas not so long ago, and it seemed like Texas had taken the lead on that recruitment. We had talked about that in a show a couple of weeks ago. Now he makes his way back to College Station, and based on everything I've heard and stuff that I've seen elsewhere, it seems like the Aggies are now once again in the lead for John Meredith, who comes in as the number 1 overall corner in the entire country and one of the top 3 players in the entire country. I mean, Rivals.com has him listed as the number 2 overall player. ESPN has him as the number 2 overall player. 24/7 has him as the number 5 overall player. In every one of those rankings, however, he is the number 1 corner. That's how good this guy is. He does have another visit coming to Texas this coming weekend. We'll see if the Horns can kind of make their way back in front of that recruitment. It's kind of felt like a yo-yo at points so far this offseason with him. But nonetheless, A&M has found themselves back in good position with John Meredith. And you would hope that they could be able to close that gap and get their second 5-star corner of the class. Another player who was a headliner this past weekend was interior offensive lineman Albert Simeon. And he's visited College Station a ton. This is a guy out of Lake Charles, Louisiana, one of the top offensive linemen in the entire country. But he told Rivals.com, College Station was great. Getting around the O-line and getting to know some of those guys was great. He is set to visit Nebraska this upcoming weekend, but it really does feel like Texas A&M has the lead in that one and that they're going to close that one at the end of the day. So that would be another big-time get for the Aggies. And then another guy that I thought, was really a key for Texas A&M. And even though they have a lead on this guy, Eric McFarland III, absolutely electric wide receiver out of the state of Florida at IMG Academy. Reminds us of Zachariah Branch. He's got that kind of speed, that kind of breakaway ability and game-breaking ability. He came out of this visit, and it feels like his lead, the Texas A&M lead on him, I should say, has only been extended. So that is a great, great sign for Texas A&M. I think Georgia is another team that is really heavy on Eric McFarland right now. Obviously, Georgia did great things with Zachariah Branch this past year, but Texas A&M seems firmly in front for him. Other schools who seem to be in the mix for him as well include Miami, Tennessee, Florida, and Ohio State. But the Aggies seem to be the team to beat for Eric McFarland, for Albert Simeon, and now for John Meredith as well. A couple other guys who were in town, Joshua Dobson, another 5-star corner, Caden Henderson, the 5-star linebacker. Both of those guys are big priorities for Texas A&M. I don't think that Texas A&M will get both Dobson and Meredith. I think that Meredith is probably the guy that they would like to have more, just based on my own opinion. But it seems like that's the direction they're going to take. They're still going to continue to pursue Dobson. They're still going to continue to want Dobson until, we hear what happens with John Meredith. And they also had another interesting recruit that's not a 5-star, but another guy that I really like a lot, and that is Sarad Baker, the running back out of DeSoto. This is a guy that has become one of the hottest names at the running back position over the last few months, and he continues to kind of blow up as we go along. And he seems like a guy that Texas A&M would love to get as a part of this class. And he would be a big one because, first of all, I mean, obviously you can never have enough running backs in today's day and age of college football. These guys get, a lot of run. They can get beat up. So the more guys you have in the stable, as Texas A&M learned this past year, the better. Sarad Baker is one of the better ones in the country that continues to rise among the ranks. And I think that he is definitely going to be a priority for Texas A&M. And if you kind of look at this class as it sits right now, number 1 overall class in the country, obviously number 1 class in the SEC. 41% of the class is from the state of Texas. 17 total commits, 5 5-stars, 9 4-stars, and then you have a couple of 3-stars in there as well, with Hakeem Frampton, Aston Whiteside, and Holden Naimi, the tight end. But they're off to a hot start. And these visits just continue to build their case to finish with the number 1 overall class. I would expect that you could probably hear another 5-star come off the board. We're going to talk about that in the next segment here in the next few weeks, maybe even a couple. But it seems like everybody is kind of looking up and chasing Texas A&M at this point. And Mike Elko has found a way to assemble what could end up being one of the better classes that we've seen in recent memory for Texas A&M. I'm not sure if it's going to get to the level of the 2022 class in terms of just pure blue chip ratio. I think that would be very difficult because that was a obviously historically great class in terms of the number of 5 stars and the number of 4 stars that were a part of that group. But what's different about this one is it feels like these are players who are coming in really excited about what Mike Elko is building in College Station. They're really excited about what he has built for Texas A&M, not just in terms of the culture, not just in terms of what you've seen on the field, but getting players to the NFL, developing them. I mean, we saw what he did, what he and his staff did this past year, sending a record number of players to from Texas A&M, not just to the NFL Combine, but getting drafted in the NFL. It was an amazing year for them, and that just continues to cement what Mike Elko is doing here in College Station, and it's really been incredible to watch just in year 3 of the program. It took Jimbo Fisher a lot longer to get to that point in terms of signing classes like this one could end up being. And we'll see what happens. I feel very confident that this is going to end up finishing as the number 1 class. If they keep getting visit weekends like this one, it's only going to strengthen that. And I can't wait to see what happens next.
That's all for today's Big 6 in 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, and on campus, going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA, the Big 3 in 30 NFL, or the Big 3 in 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.